Welcome to this weekly podcast we're doing about Australian real estate, investing in Australian real estate, and real estate development in Australia. We are on this podcast talking to players in the real estate arena, whether they be investors, buyers agents, finance brokers, or just general property experts. Today's guest is a phenomenal person in this space. He is the founder and managing director of the Australian Property Professionals. He's a licensed buyer's agent. He's the author of the book Positively Geared. He's achieved financial independence himself through strategic property investing. In 18 years as a property investor and developer, he has accumulated a property portfolio worth over $12 million that is cash flow positive. He and his wife have featured in property investment magazines, including Australian Property Investor, Smart Property Investor, and Your Investment Property. He's been featured as an expert in the Daily Telegraph and has been interviewed on top radio stations 2GB and 2UE. Welcome to the show, Lloyd Edge.
Thanks, Peter.
Yeah, thanks, Lloyd. It's great to have you here on the show. Like, I've read your book and you've done some really amazing things. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people who can relate to different parts of your journey from when you're a school teacher to where you are now. So let's go back to like the beginning a little bit, and you can go back as far as you want if you want to talk about your childhood. But let's take it back a bit to how this journey in the real estate industry started for you.
Yeah, well, look, originally I was a teacher, really. I was a musician and a teacher. Didn't really have any real estate blood. In fact, my parents always thought that if you couldn't afford to pay cash for something, you shouldn't be buying it at all. And that essentially meant that you weren't buying real estate, essentially, and they weren't investors or anything like that. So I didn't have any of that kind of investing blood. And they don't really talk to you about finances and things at school. So it was actually during my years of teaching that I realized that I really wasn't going to set myself up very well from a financial point of view for the future on my current income. And when I was originally teaching, I was a peripatetic teacher, which basically meant that I was teaching on an hourly rate rather than a salary. So I wasn't really having any money contributed to super either. So I really had nothing there, and I really had to set myself up for the future. So I started to sort of get into property, thinking that I just could set myself up better that way. And then one thing led to the other, where I started to actually grow a portfolio and discover lots of different ways that I could actually really look after myself in the future.
Yeah. I'm sure there's a lot of people who can relate to a lot of what you're saying there. Like, a lot of people there, there's a lot of beliefs out there, or people are taught things like, do what you love and the money will come. Well, like, there's a lot of musicians and a lot of actors and a lot of artists who are doing what they love, but the money is not actually coming. So I'm sure they can relate to that. And then, there's a lot of school teachers who are great at what they do, and they're terrific people and they do a fantastic job, but they're under the pump financially a lot of the time. What was it? Like, what was the kind of like the spark that made you go, okay, I think real estate is the thing for me to, really move myself forward financially?
Look, I think the spark for me was actually seeing some of the large houses and the successful portfolios that actually some of my students and their families had. So when I was teaching, I was actually teaching in some pretty wealthy schools. And I was always wondering how those people could afford to live the lifestyles they did, to have that sort of money. And it often came down to real estate. And I was working in the eastern suburbs of Sydney. And very expensive schools I was working at, but I wasn't earning much money myself, and I was trying to imagine how I could actually earn that sort of money, and that kind of sparked my interest. And also just seeing parents of my students driving around in convertibles and stuff like that, and the point of that's not I'm not really materialistic about that, but it's more like, okay, people have obviously got the means to be able to do that and set themselves up. So that's what really sparked my interest to be able to move forward and wonder how I can actually get into that position myself one day.
Yeah, and it's a funny thing that, that conversation about being materialistic or not, it's kind of relevant and it's kind of not. Like, most people if they're sane, they'd rather drive a nicer car than a broken down car. Most people would rather live in a beautiful house than in a poor, like a non-functioning poor house. Like most people want those things, and there's almost like this belief that I can't yearn for too much materially. Well, there's actually nothing wrong with having the best of everything. I'm kind of interested too, is that, okay, so you've got the spark and you've noticed, you've kind of observed the people around you, and you've said, hey, there's some people who are doing very well here, and the common thread seems to be a lot of them are involved in real estate. Did you then go and like invest in something, or did you educate yourself? What were the steps you took once you had that spark? Once you kind of said, I think I've found the way that I might be able to do it, what were your next steps then?
Well, that's really interesting, Pete, because these days I'd always be suggesting to people, get yourself educated first before you do anything. Yep. Back then I was just, really enthusiastic. So I thought, okay, I've got the spark now. I'm going to jump out. I'm going to start buying property.
Yeah.
And of course, doing that without really knowing what I was doing meant that I was, had no strategy. I was pretty much buying, maybe the wrong properties at the wrong time in the market and things like that. So looking back, most of those properties I originally bought have actually done quite well. But quite often I just bought them, I was kind of just lucky about where I bought them and buying in the right location. But really, I would have been better to get educated first, because I essentially just went out and I sort of bought a 1-bedroom apartment, happened to be near the shops and near the water and, near the amenities. So that worked out okay. And then I went and bought another property and moved on. But I did find myself quite negatively geared.
Yep.
And I had 4 or 5 properties at one stage, but didn't have a lot of cash flow coming in. And I was using my teacher's salary to try to fund these properties.
Right.
And I was thinking, gee, I'm not doing too well here. I thought you're supposed to be making a lot of money out of property. And for me, it felt like I was going the other way.
Yeah. No, that's an interesting thing, isn't it? That you're probably like the very thing you were trying to get out of, you're probably with that negative gearing sort of total negative gearing strategy was probably putting you deeper and deeper into that sort of cash flow hole that you were experiencing anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And because I really didn't have a real strategy there. I was kind of doing what, you sort of told and what other people were doing, which is kind of just go and buy a property and hope for the best, and that, all properties go up in value and all that kind of stuff. And that's very simplistic, and there's obviously a lot more to it than that. And, later on, I sort of developed strategies on where you can actually add value to properties and kind of manufacture that, the equity yourself, and then, the cash flow that comes from having, say, dual income properties and things. I developed that a little bit later on, which made a big difference to my portfolio and my wealth creation going forward.
Okay, excellent. So let's talk a little bit about that. So you've got yourself, you've bought your 1-bedder, you've got a few properties on board, you're highly negative geared, you're kind of wondering, if you'll ever go on a holiday or how you're going to pay for your food next week, because all your cash flow is going to fund, the real estate game you've got yourself into. What did you do then to, like, what was it? How did you get educated around like value adding or, building out a strategy? Like, let's not necessarily go into the strategy right now, but let's just talk about how you learnt what you needed to do to get away from that like totally negative geared position.
Yeah, so I figured there must be a much better way than just buying a property and holding for 30 years. So I just was doing a lot of research and a lot of reading and realized that, you can add value to, to improve the value of properties, whether that's through a renovation or a subdivision and things like that. So I became very interested in that, but it's a subdivision that really piqued my interest because, building a property and then subdividing it for an equity gain was fantastic for me. And the very first time I built a duplex, the amount of equity I got on it was twice as much as what I was earning the whole year as a teacher. Wow. And that's when the light bulb went off in my head, and I thought, oh wow, I'm onto something here, because I've been slaving away, working all year as a teacher, and suddenly I just build a duplex and get this sort of equity. If I just repeat the process, I can really start moving forward. And that's when I started to sort of set that strategy and also set some goals, because I didn't really have the goals before. And so I really started to strategize everything from there.
Okay, so let's have a look at that. So I just want to make it crystal clear for everybody who's watching or listening. So you were, like, as a teacher, let's say your income for a year was, what was 80,000, 100,000?
Well, it was 70,000 at the time. Yeah.
Okay, $70,000. So you've got $70,000 income as a teacher, but then by doing a duplex. And what you mean by that is you bought some land and then you built essentially two houses that are joined together on that piece of land. And then you sold off both of those, the duplexes, so both sides of the duplex. And,
So in this occasion, I actually kept them.
okay.
And I refinanced them essentially. So I kept them. So I paid a certain amount for the land and for the build, and the actual numbers were something like 600,000 for the total project.
Yeah.
But when it was subdivided, they were then worth, individually, I was getting about 390,000 each side.
Yeah,
so there was a massive valuation uplift there because, combined they were something like about 780 or thereabouts, although it only cost about 600,000 to build.
Yeah. So you've outlaid 600 and you've built something that's now worth 780, which that provides a lot of options, doesn't it? You can, like we said, you can either sell them off and pocket 180,000 less any tax you might have to pay, or probably the better strategy is the strategy you took, where if you're able to hold on to them, you've then got the equity uplift, which you can access that equity by getting another loan, and then the rent on the properties can actually go towards paying off that loan.
That's exactly right. So the better strategy for me is holding the properties and then refinancing. Of course, everybody's got their ceiling where they can only borrow so much. So there is a time where sometimes you do need to sell properties, and maybe with a duplex is really good because you could actually keep one side and sell the other side and that kind of stuff. But certainly, for me, keeping that first one and just refinancing, 80% or so of that increased equity amount, and I use that as a deposit to get into another property. The thing about it is that I didn't have to wait years to buy another property. I could actually access that money as soon as my duplex was finished, and then get into another property. In fact, there's enough equity there to get another couple of properties straight away. So I could actually sort of get into another duplex deal and had a bit left over to put a deposit on another cheaper property as well, and just keep moving forward.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, and I mean, this is gold really for people who are in those, very hardworking, honest folk, who are working hard at their job. They're good at their job, like teachers, nurses, policemen, people in the, the military, tradesmen. This is a really good strategy for them, isn't it? That they've got a kind of bit of a ceiling on the income they can earn. But in doing something like this, they don't have to take substantial amounts of risk, but they can create equity, just like you created that extra $180,000 equity, and then that can catapult them towards a larger portfolio. So, I mean, I'm guessing you have a lot of people who were in a similar situation to you, who are now working with you to sort of follow their own dreams down that path as well.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And I've got a lot of people that come to me that have even less of an income than what I had at the time, and I work with them to try to get them into a similar sort of situation. And it's not necessarily always a duplex. Sometimes people may not be able to afford a duplex to start with, but they are looking at whatever the property purchase is and whatever their budget, getting a property where we can add some value to it. And that could be through a subdivision, could be through adding a granny flat, could be through doing a cosmetic renovation, or it might be through a duplex. But for me, it is about trying to value add in the property rather than just waiting for that long-term growth, but also being very strategic about where you're investing. So it still has to be in a good area for growth, because I like to talk about the trifecta, and that's something I wrote a lot about in the book I recently published, Positively Geared, where I talk about the trifecta, which is instant equity, positive cash flow, and capital growth. So if you're getting into the right area, you can get all of those in your property. So if you do keep your duplex, for example, you can get that instant equity out, refinanced immediately, but you can also get the long-term growth by keeping it in that good growth area if you're in an area that has all the amenities and the government infrastructure and so on.
Yeah, I mean, that's gold. And I mean, people, definitely in your book, Positively Geared, people can read about that and a little bit more how you did that. And I mean, they're the pretty much in every investment, they're the things people are looking at, what's the uplift in it? What's the income I'm going to get? And is it safe? Is it going to continue growing in value? But let's just look at it, because I want to continue with your journey of where you started. So you've now doubled your salary in one deal. So, and then you said you took the additional equity you got there and you bought another duplex and you bought another property. How did those two deals go after that?
Yeah, so I went into a duplex deal actually in Toowoomba in Queensland at the time.
Yep.
Um, that's another one that netted a fair bit of equity. I think probably about 120, 130,000 I got out of that one at the time. But I also had enough money left over from that first duplex as to put a deposit on an apartment that I bought in Brisbane as well. So it allowed me to get into a capital city market. And at the time, when I was early on in my investing, I didn't have any. I didn't have very many. I had a few properties in Sydney, but I was trying to get into some other capital city markets.
Yep.
And having a low income and not too much deposit, creating equity allowed me to create the deposit to get into some other properties. So it allowed me to get into Brisbane. The next duplex that I built, I raised enough equity in that allowed me to get into the Newcastle market, and I ended up buying a few properties there, and I sort of just catapulted my portfolio from there. And essentially, most of the time keeping the properties, but sometimes selling them because you do hit that serviceability limit,
Yeah.
and things like that. But keeping them for cash flow where I can, and then just refinancing equity has allowed me to keep moving forward.
Okay, so it sounds like your strategy at this point is you've learned some lessons in getting too negatively geared and where that can take you to. You've now started creating, like it seems like the real catapult for you has been being able to create instant equity and then access that equity to buy more properties that can finance themselves. Would you say that's correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. That's exactly what we do. Yeah.
Yeah. So so you're in Brisbane, you're in Melbourne, you're in Toowoomba, you're in Sydney. What is the next stage after that? Is that where you're currently at, or was there more after that?
No, so well, I've got quite a few properties
Yeah.
at the moment, but they're spread across the East Coast.
Yeah.
So I generally don't have any properties on the West Coast,
Yeah.
like Perth or Darwin, for example, up north.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is they're a little bit reliant on the resources factor,
Yeah.
Resources sector there. So I feel that we don't need to go into those markets because they fluctuate a little bit too much.
Yeah.
One mistake I did make along the way was I actually bought in a mining town,
Right.
in Blackwater in central Queensland.
Yep.
And it was a very high yielding investment.
Yeah.
I think I paid about $250,000 for the property, and it was returning about $840 a week in rent.
Wow.
That was massive.
Wow.
But when the mining boom ended at the end of 2012,
Yeah.
overnight the rent plummeted from about 800 a week to about 190 a week.
Wow.
And the property values plummeted as well in
Yeah.
the area.
Yeah.
Lucky I only owned one of those properties and not lots like some unfortunate people did.
Yeah.
But that's kind of a lesson learned too, that you don't buy in a one horse town. You need to buy where there's several industries that are
Yeah.
in the town.
It's an interesting point you raised there too. Like I know some people building portfolios, they actually think they've got to spread out across all states, and a lot of people have been taught that diversification is a good thing, and diversification is only a good thing if you're going to make a couple of bad decisions. If you understand the market you're operating in, and you're particularly with what you said about the trifecta of instant equity, capital growth, and positively geared, there's no need to diversify into like outland markets. You can just keep going into the main market. You don't have to diversify if you keep backing winners all of the time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Diversification, you're right. You need to sort of know the markets and be confident in what you're doing. But some people say you need to own a property in every capital city in the country or something, but you just don't. I think diversification is good across some states for a few reasons, and that might be say to avoid land tax. So if you have all your properties in one location, you got to end up paying land tax.
Yeah.
But you can also diversify by also buying different structures. So buy some in your own name, buy some in in a trust or a company structure.
Yeah.
That obviously helps that, and it also helps with lending as well. But if you've got property spread out across, say, Victoria, New South Wales, and Queensland, that is enough diversification. You don't really need to go too far else. I don't believe so anyway. Not very many people would have all their property, say, in a location like Sydney, because Sydney's so expensive that you wouldn't get too many properties there. But then again, it's not really about the number of properties; it's about the value and what they can do for you.
Yeah.
But for me, I've invested a fair bit regionally as well because the price point is cheaper, the yield's higher, it's easier to get into those markets. And then I use the equity created there to help me get into a capital city market. So
Yeah.
diversification is important to an extent, but
Yep.
you don't need to go everywhere. You don't need to have just, every city in Australia covered.
Yeah. No, that makes total sense what you're saying there. So now you have mainly properties across, and I tend to agree with you. Like I've seen, in my lifetime, the boom and bust that's happened in Perth several times. Like there's sometimes when like the resources boom is happening, the real estate in those Western in Western Australia, it just follows the resources boom. Like what if resources are booming, you get people coming to you and they are the smartest real estate investors of all time.
Yep.
For a short amount of time. And then they're coming back saying, I'm finished. I can't get anyone to rent this place anymore. The mine shut down.
Yeah.
So yeah, you got to be very careful, chasing those kinds of rainbows. That's for sure. So you've got, properties, and are you still, with your strategy now, are you still buying duplexes, small development sites, or are you looking at larger, 10, 20 apartments, that sort of thing? What's your strategy?
I generally still do the smaller, the duplexes, because that's what
Yep.
I'm comfortable with and know well. I
Yep.
do some of the slightly larger sites for some of the clients I work with.
Yep.
So, people might want to build a 4-pack or a 6-pack of townhouses and things.
Yep.
And I can certainly manage that for people.
Yep.
For people who've got a suitable budget.
Yep.
But certainly for myself, the duplexes are what's always worked for me. They're a bit easier to get in and out. Council approval is more straightforward and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. It's an interesting product, isn't it? The duplex, in that it's say as compared to like 6 townhouses, it's a commercial development. Even if it's a residential product, it's a commercial development.
That's right. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, but the duplexes are still kind of looked on as a purely residential product.
They are. There's only 2 units, so generally, like sometimes some lenders these days really look at 3 units as being commercial.
Yeah.
And definitely 4 will be commercial, but 2 is still residential. So it's much easier to get through lending.
Yeah, get through lending, get through council approvals. And I mean, the big benefit for that, which I'm sure you would agree with this, is that the time frame that it takes to turn over one of those deals is considerably shorter. So then you can be parlaying that into the next deals that you want to do a lot quicker as well.
Sure.
Yeah, and that's kind of can create in a way, like to do 6 townhouses can actually be slower than doing 3 lots of 2 duplexes, so that you can actually shorten the time by just doing the duplex, getting the equity, and then multiplying in that fashion. Yeah. Okay, cool. And then what is your, at the moment, what's your sense of where the market is in Australia? And I mean, in terms of let's look at specific areas that you think are doing well or going to do well, and then maybe if you could let us know what you think are places probably to stay out of for the moment.
Yeah, so the markets are really strong at the moment. They're really becoming quite heated. It's amazing. I've been attending some auctions lately, and there's been well over 100 people at some of them, close to 200 at some of them. The markets that are starting to do really well, actually, some of those coastal and regional centres, because there has been a bit of a trend for people to be moving out of the big smoke as a result of perhaps COVID and this trend to sort of be working from home and moving away to larger homes that are a bit cheaper and they have offices and stuff. So places that have really been starting to go off are North Coast of New South Wales. So, areas like Port Macquarie, Lennox Head, those kind of areas, going really, really strongly there. And of course, around the Newcastle Central Coast markets are coming into a sort of another cycle of growth. Sydney is going to get some good growth again this year, but Sydney, amazingly, is not moving at the same rate at the moment as some of the regional centres.
Right.
So, which is unusual. So the regional centres are certainly leading that race at the moment. Melbourne has been hurt a little bit from the lockdown.
Yeah.
So it's probably not moving as much at the moment. It had more of a decline last year than the other centres. But again, some of the regional centres are doing really well. So you need to look at areas like Geelong and Norlane, which is part of Geelong, and Bendigo, Ballarat, and even around Wodonga, and then into New South Wales, Albury. Albury, which has a 0.22% vacancy rate at the moment. Lots of demand for tenancies and stuff around there. Moving into other states, I really like the Sunshine Coast. I think that's really had some legs for a few years and still has some more legs to go on it. The markets that have recovered the most so far, though, and that are really moving forward, probably because they had a fair bit to recover from, are Darwin and Perth. Now, Darwin and Perth were the only two capitals in Australia that actually had a decline in house prices in the decade from 2010 to 2020.
Wow.
Now, as I said before, they're very reliant on the resources sector. So they're starting to come back now, and a lot of people are sort of talking about how much growth you can potentially get there, but they do fluctuate a bit. So you get into a market like that, you're going to want to, if you say do a development or you want to buy something for the short term, get in there, and then for people who think they're clever, they might want to try to time the market and sort of get out, because holding for long term, it's going to be a little bit more risky in those sort of markets as well. So I still like the East Coast. A lot of people talk about Tasmania for the cheap price points and the high yields. I don't feel there's enough going in Tasmania that has long-term growth drivers. So again, you don't really need to diversify into Tasmania, despite what everybody talks about. I think there's probably better places to plant your money. I think the South Australian market, particularly within Adelaide, is quite good, but it's quite a steady market, so you're not going to get a lot of booms or busts there. But in terms of where to place your money, think regionally at the moment, because some of those regional markets are doing really well, and of course they're at a cheaper price point, but those cheaper price points won't stay cheap for too long. I mean, we can just look at Wollongong, which had a big boom and became the third most expensive city in Australia after its last boom a couple of years ago. So these regional centres that are close to capital cities, can do really, really well.
Yeah, it sounds like, and I mean, we probably won't know the full effect of it probably for another year or 18 months. But I think one of the things that has happened culturally or socially with the pandemic is that there's been now like an embracing of, you don't have to go into a city centre to work. So that even like from an employer's point of view, they've been forced into this position where they've got to trust that their employees, whilst at home, will still do their job. And like with the proliferation of the use of things like Zoom, it's facilitated that being able to happen, so that people are now thinking, well, do we spend X amount of dollars here for a 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom older house? Or do we move to Lennox Head and build a 5-bedroom, 3-bathroom, 4-garage? Like they're getting the bang for the buck in the regional centres. And now the ability to work from those centres is so great. It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out over the next year to 18 months.
Yes, it is very interesting, because I think over the long term, I'm not sure that all businesses are just going to be allowing people just to work from home or wherever they want over the long term. I mean, it's a bit of a thing at the moment, but 5 years down the track, we might be close to being back to normal. Who knows, really? But certainly at the moment, people are sort of taking advantage of that and moving to those those places. And I really wish I'd bought shares in Zoom 24 months ago, because that's really all the go at the moment.
It would be a winner. Yeah, look, the other thing I've seen culturally as well is somewhere in between, where there seems to be more opportunities. Like I was speaking to someone recently, and they're actually a social worker, but they've looks like they're going to get a position on the North Coast, and they'll do like a stint up there for about 8 days and then have 6 days off and come back to Sydney for the 6 days. So it might get into that as well. Yeah. So what about yourself? Where are you? What's your plans next? Like, I mean, in your own portfolio, with your business, with your clients, what do you see as, if I was to say to you, let's Lloyd jump in the time machine, 5 years time, Cronulla have won their second premiership, and we're looking at where you're at that point in time. How would you describe that?
So look, I'm obviously still continuing to invest, and I like the idea of trying to obviously get more land for ourselves to build personally for a portfolio. I'm in the process also of I guess, paying down a lot of debt. So I've got a 45% LVR across my portfolio now. So I've got really good debt levels. When I first started out, I was sort of leveraging at 95%, buying some properties at 105%. But gone are those days. I'm now trying to, get that all in check, and sort of obviously working on paying off our home, our dream home, which we bought a couple of years ago. So that's sort of a key point which I'm working on at the moment. In terms of business, look, we're growing at the moment, and at the moment just trying to help as many people as we can, I guess, achieve their dreams. And everyone's dreams are a little bit different. But I love hearing what people are trying to achieve and what position they're currently in, and seeing how we can help them there. And, as we grow, we're getting more staff on board that can assist people to do that and everything. So I'm sort of looking forward to being able to help more and more people. We have a lot of expats overseas as well, who never actually even see their properties and things, and we sort of help manage their portfolios for them and things like that, because people might earn good money overseas and put their money back in Australia and things like that. Yes, look, it's all about just trying to help people with their goals and with strategic property investing. But I wrote my book, Positively Geared, just recently, which basically just details my journey. And the idea of that was to sort of inspire people more than anything. It wasn't really meant to be a lead magnet to pick up clients or anything, but it was more about just to share my journey and to let people know that if I can do it, so can you. Because I started as a teacher on a low income and built things up, and so I a lot of people have sort of been reading that book. It's a bestseller now, and been getting some good feedback around that. Just around I detail some strategies in there. There's some case studies in there from some of my clients who've done well, and I have a couple of my own case studies for my own properties in there as well. It just gives people a bit of a taste of what what I'm up to and what I do.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And like as I said, I've read the book, and it is a great read. It's kind of very very matter of fact. It's easy to understand, but it really nicely details where you came from and how you built to the successes you are today. So look, I mean, if people wanted to get in touch with you, Lloyd, if they wanted to get the book, what's the best way to get the book, and what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Well, the book's available on Amazon, so I guess people from anywhere around the world can buy it on Amazon. But it's also available in bookshops, so you can walk in, obviously, to Dymocks and Collins and QBD, just about anywhere really. Online at Amazon and Booktopia, Kogan, any of those areas. It's called Positively Geared, and then my website's ozpropertyprofessionals.com.au, so people could just jump on the website and have a look at what we do there, and they can always just leave an inquiry on the website to touch base with us and everything like that. But always happy to chat with people. People may not necessarily always be looking for a buyer's agent or something. Maybe people might just be looking for a bit of advice or a bit of helpful hints on their own portfolio. And I'm always happy, whenever I've got the time to have a chat with people as well, which doesn't cost people anything, just for a chat, just to give people some guidance as well. So always happy to hear from people.
Okay, great. And I mean, if the other way is if people want to get in contact with you, they can contact me, and I've got your details, and obviously can connect you with that person as well. So thanks for coming on the show. It's been great. I've read your book. I've spoken to you before. I know a bit about your journey, but every time I speak to you, I get more and more enthused. You're a very inspirational guy. You've come from very humble beginnings to quite a successful person now. So very well done on that. And thanks again for coming on the show.
Great. Thanks, Pete. It's been good to be with you.
Yeah, cheers, Lloyd.
Cheers.